I just got it. I decided I'm gonna put it in today because it fits right in with what we're talking about. No, it's not a virus. I'm almost sure it's just a leaf spot. It's too wet and changeable weather. 60 degrees at night, 90 degrees at day. Bad news. So just take off the bad leaves like you would on an annual geranium.
Yeah, there I do it too. Somehow the geranium haven't really done bad with this weather.
No, it's surprising, isn't it? But then every plant came from a different place. They came from South Africa. I think the GM came from some place in the Mideast, I think. And weather's different there. What they evolved with is different than what we got here. But I was glad to get your picture because I thought I just put in those and I just closed things up. Hello, everybody. We're warm up here for Free4All Friday, number 15. See if anybody's got anything that they'd like to talk about. Hey, Greg. Let's hope that people have some suggestions for Greg. I could ask for a show of hands. How many people here are over 65? Because Greg has some questions for those of us gardening into the 70s and 80s, and but we still keep on keeping on. That's just what we do. Any questions we can warm up with here? Let's see if I can remember how to do this. There we go. That a beautiful hydrangea. I just love hydrangeas.
Your question, I say.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you have a question? Do you have a question, Sonia?
What's the name of that plant that Mark said?
Mangrove.
Would you like a mangrove shoot? You can make house plants from it. And I thought they look really cool.
You are so kind. We, however, left all of our houseplants at the old house when we moved into this one because it is shaded by trees completely on the south side, has no windows on the east side, no windows on the west side, and a huge overhang. There, I told all my houseplants, I said, I'm sorry, I'm not buying all of you guys lights. So we grow our stuff outside now. So I would take it. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to turn your microphone off for right now while we see if there's anybody else that's got any questions. P.S. Mason, I don't recognize your name, but I'm glad. Welcome to the crew. Sonia, who I was just talking to, I've seen at a number of talks that I've done. We've met her, and we featured in a video we just made, Stephen and I. We featured a voodoo lily that she brought to me. But this is an oak leaf hydrangea. I think it's what is the one that's got the gold leaves? King's Ransom. Anyway, pretty plant. And for those of you who saw me cutting back the swamp milkweed when it was about 4.5 feet tall, because I wanted to slow it down. It took it just 4 days to sprout new pieces, and it's now well over my head. It is huge this year. Swamp milkweed is trying to take over the world, and some years they just have all the conditions that they're looking for. My container plants, though, are not doing well. Took some containers from my grandkids, and they're don't have drain holes in them. They just have reservoirs in the bottom. Bad year for those. Too much water, unless you tip them on their side or hide them underneath an overhang. They get too much water. Oh, sorry, somebody's hand is up. Greg, that's you. Go ahead, Greg. Just turn on your microphone. What's up?
Hi, Jan. How are you?
I'm fine. Kind of in a run today. The dogs were making me chase them around just a little while ago. If you don't chase them around and give them something to do, they stand at the door and make woofing noises while we're trying to talk. So
yeah. So it's all this whole dilemma is kind of your fault for hosting Julia there a couple weeks ago.
Oh no. I might have had the fire, but the fire was already gone.
Well, I'm sitting here and I've been cutting back, on the amount of beds that I have and trying to, just pare it back a little bit. I do have my stuff at home, but I also take care of about a 3,000 square foot garden at church that I maintain there. So that keeps me pretty busy there too. But as we gardeners go along, you're always seeing new plants and knew this and knew that. And you're walking and you're seeing people doing different things, and you're like, oh, I should try that. Oh, I should try that. Well, there's a limit at 70. I mean, it's not like I'm unable, I'm physically pretty, in very good shape, I think, for my age, but my stamina, I can't go out there at dawn and work till dusk like I used to.
Well,
Um,
shame on you for admitting to that.
yeah.
But, I'm going to treat this like some of the radio shows that I listen to. At the top of the hour, they tell you what they're going to talk about, and then they break to tell you the weather and the news of the day.
Yeah.
Because when everyone is here and I don't want to cut anybody out of the conversation. I want to ask that question and let other people answer, because I have some answers.
Okay.
Even I've put them together, but yes, what do you do when you're getting to the point where it's too much? I've gotten myself.
It's too much. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Okay, so hang
So
on. We'll
anyway,
go to
that's
that.
that's how this all came about, though. I was just watching Julia a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, oh my goodness, how did he do this? How do people manage a garden that large?
Yeah, there.
And because I'm having a hard time keeping up with my little urban lot here, So
Yeah,
go ahead. I'll let you go there. I'm
We'll
just
make that-
wanted to let you know where that all came
we'll make
from.
that our first topic once we get everybody here and give them a shot.
All
at
right.
it. Okay.
All right, good. All right.
Any other questions that we want to start with here? I recognize some names, and a number must be a phone
Hang-
number.
Hey, there's one from Karen. At the
Okay.
beginning, Karen in, at the beginning of June, I purchased 2 cannas, each one about a foot tall with no more than a few leaves on them. Now, 2 months later, both are about 8 foot tall with no less than 10 to 12 stalks in each pot, but no flowers. What happened? I used Proven Winners water soluble fertilizer over the last 2 months.
It's been a long time since anybody asked that, and it's interesting that it comes up now, because most of the cannas, not all of them, but most of the canna hybrids do not bloom until the days begin getting quite short. And people will always see them when they're in bloom and go, oh, I love those plants, I have to have those. And then say the same thing. They say, but it didn't bloom and it didn't bloom. If it was blooming when you got it, it could be that it was started quite early and stimulated to bloom in the short days of spring and kept by the grower until then. Or it's one of the hybrids that does manage to bloom first, but it will bloom. And then you'll say, oh, I love this plant. But in the meanwhile, the leaves are what you really enjoy. That's all that I can tell you about that. It used to be all the time. And then some newer varieties started coming out. They may even say on them that they're earlier blooming or more reliable blooming, but I haven't looked them up in the catalogs to see for sure. I know the one that Steve brought home for me from the grower was started quite early and probably got its stimulus then. And then sometimes it's not a good thing because they start blooming when they're quite little. And there you are deadheading and getting flowering leaves instead of the big leaves that you want to have. So it's a trade-off for one or the other. But I'm pretty sure yours is going to bloom. Anyone have any experience with that same thing happening to them? This is Julia Hoffley's front door with, let me see, probably a tenth of the plants that are just at her front door. Whoop. And we did tour Julia Hoffley's garden a couple of Fridays ago. If you missed it, it is on the recording for the 13th. I think we did our 13th visit with Julia. Yeah, quite an incredible gardener. Some people. So welcome to Free4All Friday, where we welcome all gardeners to celebrate growing and also to cultivate some problem solving together. This is our 15th Free4All Friday. It's August 9th. So we have a lot of hot weather questions coming to you from gardenatz.org. I'm Janet Makanovich, and managing.
I'm Stephen.
There he is.
I'm Stephen Nicola.
Getting a little fuzzy there, Stephen.
Yeah, starting to get a little fuzzy, that's for sure.
Every year in June, Steve stops shaving the beard because he is Santa at the season, and he is Santa. If you want to bring kids to someone who is Santa, he really is.
I do love doing it.
He's also watching to make sure that microphones are turned off and cameras are off so that we don't have too much riot trying to go on. And all you need to do to ask a question anytime You can do it right now if you want. Just go into the chat. There's a chat button someplace on your screen, or find your raise your hand control. So Steve is making sure if we start hearing noises, he's going to turn off your video or your microphone, but we hope you'll watch that. If you open the chat, and if your video is off, we won't see you slurping coffee or lemonade, I guess now. The raise your hand control is either in participants or it's in reactions. It's someplace there. Every time I look, it's in a different place on these things. In reactions, which might be in your more menu. The chat, remember when you're chatting and you're typing a question, don't do the typist thing and hit return at the end of the line.
And this is me in my 60s.
Yeah, because it will.
Sorry, that was me.
That was you. It will, if you hit return, the question will pop up onto the screen. And maybe you had another sentence and you type in the next sentence, and meanwhile, 4 people have interjected in between you. So it's hard to put those things together. So don't hit return until you're ready for the chat question to pop up. Okay, so let's start. Number 15, Free for All Friday. Steve and me, yeah, I got a lot less beard there, Steve. And we've been running the gardenA2Z.org website so that we can put up our writing that we've done, and we're continuing to do. And given my voice being raspy every time we cut onto one of these things, maybe I'll be doing more writing and less videoing kind of stuff. We started these because for so many years, we were getting questions all the time from the Detroit News article that we ran, from Michigan Gardener, from classes that we were teaching. And it just seemed like for a while there, it was getting to where we weren't hearing enough of what's going on in other people's gardens. That's Steve. So we look to you for questions, whatever you've got. Like, what is that plant? Like, what is that plant? That is one of the Echiums, E-C-H-I-U-M. And it's not hardy for us. We took this picture when we were in New Zealand, but oh, I love Echiums. We can grow them as annuals, or with a great deal of effort, you can lift and store the roots. It's a big root, but aren't they beautiful plants? And don't we always want to grow whatever we can't grow, whatever we can't grow? So I made a promise to, where'd it go? Made a promise to Greg that we talk about senior gardeners. Greg says he's 71, he still wants it all, especially when he sees things like Julia Hoffley's garden, but he has less stamina. He wants to know, is he alone? And what do we have to give up? We tried our best to make this answer by talking to older gardeners. For instance, we were in Alpena last week, and talked to Elizabeth Littler, who is online with us today, I think. And she introduced us to a group of people. Linda, and Carol. Elizabeth, if you want to contribute.
Oh, I can't remember.
Yeah, I just remember Linda 1 and Linda 2. And we were talking about that, about who takes care of this big garden. They said, well, we do. And where are the younger gardeners? We don't know. They're all busy doing something. And we'll take 50-year-olds, we'll take 45-year-olds, we'll take 40-year-olds, we're getting Girl Scouts helping us at the Waterford Library, but the younger gardeners are not turning out to do the volunteer work like we've been doing for a long time. So what do we do? Where do we go to recruit people, especially for our own gardens? My friend Burdette Chapman, there with me in these pictures, when she was 90, partnered with me, and we went out and interviewed people who were over 70 and over 75 is what we were looking for, but we found a couple just over 70 that were still doing their own gardening, to ask them some questions about what they do, why they keep doing it, how they manage to keep doing it. And we put it all into a presentation that we call, so these are some of them: Will, Mildred, Virginia, Marge, Jermaine, Catherine. We asked them a list of questions that we then presented the answers as a composite to people. And that is available on our free webinars page, number 51. It's called Simplify to Keep on Growing. And I don't think you should get any magic potions. You might get some comfort from people saying, yep, it's hard. Lois said, sit, always sit whenever you can sit. What did Bert tell you, Steve? What did he say? He said, maybe gardening is what we want to do when we get older, because otherwise we fall down when we lean down.
It's something along, he made it a little more humorous.
Something about all your brains roll to one side of your head and you fall over. I mean, I think his point was, you got to keep laughing about it. And Phyllis said she gardens near pavement, garden on surfaces that are easy to walk on. Frank said raise everything, raise beds, put them in containers, get them up high. What did Ginger say? Never stop. She said, never
Yes.
stop. That's how you keep going. You never, ever stop. She maintains 2 acres all by herself. And she also said you don't get worried about things. Yeah, don't worry about the plant names anymore. Don't worry about the weeds taking over in one place or another. There will always be a place where weeds are taking over. And Betty said, take as much of it as you can inside so that you remember why you went outside in the first place. But take a look at that presentation. And anybody who's got any suggestions for Greg, what do you do? What do you give up? I mean, what do you give up? Steve and I have given up big perennial gardens. We have a lot of perennials in the yard, but we're emphasizing now ground covers, things that we have learned over the years persist on their own, keep their own space well, and we've stopped rescuing plants. If you're I wonder if I put that in here. No, I didn't put it in here. If you're a subscriber to our weekend walkabouts, then you've gotten an invitation to come to our garden this weekend, and a couple other gardens that are open in the group, to take a look and talk about what are we doing, how are we doing it, because it is a lot of work. What do you think, Steve? Is anybody suggesting anything at all?
I haven't. Just that Karen and Bruce seem to be having the same problems with their peonies. And Therese said she also gave up many perennials. I'm not sure where that came from. I might have missed something.
The fussier perennials, for sure, the fussier perennials go out. And maybe you've already done that, Greg, and thrown out the fussier perennials, the ones that need to be staked, or the ones that need to be sprayed, or the ones that need to be divided every year in order to look good. You start gravitating toward the ones that can stay in one place for a while. And I've stopped worrying. Diane wrote about coreopsis this week, and we could go back and look at coreopsis. I've stopped trying everything new that comes out. I did for a while. I guess I was looking for the right plant. This is our old garden.
Yeah, we also are going with a lot of shrubs. I don't know about giving up. We're going with shrubs so we could give up pruning.
Right, more low shrubs, and we're giving them room to grow, which means that if you look at our new garden right now, it's not full like this. There's still bare areas showing, which, by the way, I figured are a good thing to have. And I'm going to miss when they fill in, because I need room to walk in there. My balance is off. I know it goes. My sisters have told me that their balance is going, and my sisters don't have Parkinson's, but I have Parkinson's, and so the balance is going pretty quickly. So I need places to put my feet where I know I'm not going to smash something. I fell down yesterday. I was in the ditch garden, Steve. Darrell and Debbie were working on the mailbox, and I was in the ditch garden, determined to get that piece of buckwheat that I saw climbing on top of something. And I fell backwards into some daylilies. And because it's a low ditch, if Darrell and Debbie weren't here, and they didn't actually even see me fall, but I could have called out to them, nobody would have seen me. And I could have laid in that ditch like that dead possum laid in our ditch at the old house. Nobody would have found me.
I guess so.
Yep.
Suzanne says she's giving up all hostas and donating it to her son who has no deer. Think I'll fill with ferns.
Yeah, which is what Pierre and Cheryl were doing in their
Yep.
back area in the old garden. They said
Donna has stopped working for others.
Yeah, sooner or later you have to say, I think I can't quite do too many gardens anymore. On the other hand, Catherine, when we talked to her in the Simplify to Keep on Growing, there's Catherine right there on the bottom right. She volunteered at a group called On Your Own with disabled adults who wanted to garden, and she helped them garden. Lorraine and Ward at our zoo garden group were well into their 80s, but coming to help us at the zoo, because then they still had a garden. They still had a place where they could grow. And they also contributed to Simplify to Keep on Growing. And Lorraine said, we go out for an hour a day and we don't worry about how much we get done. We just worry that we're out there seeing the garden, enjoying the garden, and doing something in it.
Yeah.
So I think it is a big change for.
Elizabeth said no annuals, a lot of native plants.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of plants that can handle their on their own. We put in one rescued root and some seed of prairie dock into our wet ditch, thinking, okay, it belongs in wetlands and it's native here. Let's see what it'll do. And it did spread itself down the wet part of the ditch, and very few things could grow with it. Very few things. I wish we could have brought it with us successfully here, but at the new house, it's too dry.
Yeah, for the tall flowers, it's better for us than the compass plant because of the way
Yeah,
it
you get,
stays straight in
Right.
waves, not flaps.
you get all this height, 10 feet, 8, 10 feet, but the leaves are all down at the bottom, so the weight doesn't drag it down. They do eventually. If we let them go completely to seed, they would start laying toward the road, and I would cut them down. But we would leave them up, and the goldfinches would sit on them and eat the seeds and wave back and forth with the flower stalk. It was always fun to watch them do that. Well, think about it. If you think of anything that is helping you keep gardening, and you're, like Greg is saying, getting to an age where you don't have the stamina to or the energy to keep working on such a big garden, what do you do?
Suzanne said she hired a helper to pull weeds in her mini beds.
And we tell people, if you're going to bring somebody in to help, which you should do, you need someone in April and you need someone in October. And that kind of limits you, but you need them then, and have them do the thing that you do not want to do. Too often people bring people in to have them help, and then they say, oh no, I'll do that. I'll do that. You have to say, you do that, even though you know that they won't do it your way. You need to say, I don't want to wheelbarrow things out to the compost. I don't want to pick up prunings. I want to just stay in here and throw stuff and let other people clean it up. That's my personal.
So B.S. Mason says she's, I assume, in her 70s or his. I do like my dad in his 90s. Keep a chair in the shade and take breaks, trying to add more bushes for accent. Therese says more hardscape and art.
Yes, yeah, more hardscape. Catherine said that same thing. If you want color in a place, you can put a colorful birdhouse. You can put a bird bath. You don't even have to put water in it, but if it looks pretty, you can put it in there, and it's as good as a flower half the time. Yeah. Who was the guy that I talked to when I was writing for the Detroit News, Steve? I went down to near where your mom lived in Livonia, and he had one of those deep lots like Dennis Groh has, a little over an acre and a half, and half of it was in a vegetable garden. And he had offered to talk to me about cucumbers, growing cucumbers, because of something I'd written in my Detroit News article. And I called him to say, could we talk? And he said, well, not now. It's kind of busy in the garden right now. So we made a date, and I went down. We were sitting at a picnic table talking. And while we were talking, the back door opened. His wife, in an apron with some kind of kitchen utensil in her hand, leaned out and said, are you bringing in those beans or what? I got all the canning stuff ready. So it's like, you just keep going. And he had to be 80. And I've often been fooled by people who are 80 and active being what older than 80 and active. I have an offer. We don't have another topic. I sent some roots. Those of you who've been live to our talks about planting it well, even when the roots are wrong. I think actually we changed it to even when the roots aren't right. It sounded better. We bring what we call our corpses, a number of root masses that we've dug up and said, well, here's why the plant didn't do well. I went to get a couple of those to send down to the Columbus, Ohio Master Gardeners who are having an exposition and wanted to use our handout from that talk. We said, you certainly can, and would you like to have some roots so you've got some 3D to show, because the pictures are hard to show. So we sent 2 of these down along with pictures that we did like this to show which root it is that we're talking about here that had wound itself back and forth around and stopped other roots from growing, or this one that had wrapped itself on top of a flare root and was girdling that major important root, and that the roots should have looked like this, spread out to the side. In pulling those out, this one and another one for them, I found that, oh dear, it's hard to store wood for a long time without some things beginning to start to decay the wood. So before they decay, and while they're still useful, while I can still clean them up. If anyone is doing anything like that, if you are having some kind of exposition or something where you'd like to show a group that at your church or your volunteer garden at the library like we have, we'd be glad to clean up a couple, mark them up for you and send them to you, because seeing it in 3 dimensions is a lot different for people than seeing it on a drawing or being told about it. It's kind of like me in the physical therapy that I'm doing right now. If I can see it, not just on that piece of paper, but if the therapist shows me, here's what we do, and then helps me do it one time, I'm like we do with the directions here, we're better off. So these roots, that's a flare root, had wrapped itself this way around the whole mass of the roots and was going to stop every other flare root from being able to grow. They each would grow each year and cut each other off, pinch themselves off and die. And that little bitty root, an adventitious root that started above the flare roots and wrapped around, that alone would kill the tree. Just when they're planted too deep.
Indeed, it will.
Yeah. What do you got, Steve?
Donna wants to know, when are seeds from coneflowers mature? For example, an older flower breaks off. If I keep it, will the seeds continue to mature even though it is no longer attached to the growing plant?
Possibly. Just like a cut flower, when you cut a plant and you have that in your hand to use in a vase or whatever you're going to do with it, it's still alive. The vegetables and things we have in our crispers are still alive. They could still root if they went back into water. So if there's enough moisture in that seed head and you leave it in a place where it's warm and dry, so that the moisture in the plant that's still in the plant can be used by the developing embryos, they may ripen. So go ahead and give it a shot. It's easiest to leave them on the plant until they ripen, but then sometimes they shatter and you lose the seeds. So you can collect them when they have changed from green to brown and you're sure that they're ripe, or you can bring them in as cuts early and let them gradually turn to brown. And chances are good that they'll germinate. The germination rate might not be as high, but they'll still be there for you to give a try for things to start. Our neighbor just showed me seeds from penstemon, and I was looking at the penstemon seed heads here on Steve's plants and thinking, well, I don't think they're ripe yet. Well, she's already got them and she just let them dry and they're nicely brown and ready to go. I'm sure they're going to germinate.
Michelle is asking, do you have a picture of ones that not very old? I need to show them to someone in the tree committee at the MBA who isn't convinced to plant a sapling for memorial tree. He thinks it won't be impressive enough.
These are about the smallest ones that we have are this size that we're in, probably 2-gallon pots when they were planted. And this interior was there. The smaller ones, we did have a few smaller ones. And I know I had some red buds, some smaller red buds that were just seedlings, saplings that we took up to Harrisville or out to Kalamazoo. I can take a look and see, because it helps to have people see the real thing. And they can girdle. You might try digging up a few things in your yard. Normally we pull box elders that are in the ground, or other volunteer trees that are coming up. We just pull them and don't think about it. But what did I just pull out? Were you with me, Steve? And I was pulling out a red bud, not a red bud, but its root had gone sideways along the ground for quite a while, which means that chances are good that its roots had run into something too. So sometimes you might to loosen and dig those up and see what they look like, because they can girdle in real life too. Continue and I forgot which one is continue and which one is end.
The top, continue.
Now this is cool. My picture's in the way. I can't get to the top. There you go.
Michelle says she has a basswood from last year in a cloth pot. Maybe I will look for that one.
That's a good idea. Even some of the perennials, hibiscus. There's a good one.
Yeah.
1-year-old hibiscus machutus. It's a perennial, but it's got a woody root. Guaranteed the root is going to be wrapped around in the pot. There's no way they put them in a big enough pot They can't, they wouldn't have the room in the store. Elizabeth, you wanted to know about cutting a tree that's threatening to split. And I think you were talking about this plum tree. A while back, Elizabeth Butler sent the picture and she said, okay, this is in our community butterfly garden near the bridge. And it's gotten so big, this plum, that it's hanging over the walkway and we have to do some pruning and we're all arguing. It's the big dispute. What do we cut? What don't we cut? I sent back to her and said, I would leave that stem with the arrow and I would make a cut there and take those two trunks. One has 2 branches and one has 1 main branch. I would take those right off.
Yep,
I'm not.
I agree.
Yep, I'm not sure that it's the same tree, but she wrote now to say, okay, now we did the pruning and it looks like we cut about 3 trees based on how much wood we got out of it. What do you say, Steve, about the pile that we have in the backyard?
Yeah, it looks like you you and our neighbor cut about a dozen trees.
The neighbor was told, the neighbor just moved in next door. And she came over and asked me, she said, can you take a look at these bushes with me? My insurance agent just told me that he will cancel my insurance unless I cut these shrubs down. Now, I don't know what this insurance company is doing, whether they've taken the California regulations that say that for fire prevention, you can't have anything woody planted within X number of feet of your house, or what, or whether they're worried that somebody might hide in the bushes because they were up over the bedroom window on the high bedroom windows. But at any rate, she cut these bushes down, just a forsythia, a dwarf lilac, which we all know is not all that little, a yew, and a weeping cherry. She cut them smaller. And Steve has a stack, 5 feet tall and 10 feet across?
Yeah.
Inches, yeah.
And that's only part of them. There's still more that we'll get from her.
More we need to drag off of her deck. But nature arranges them so wonderfully, and then we have to pile them up and take up a lot of room. So I'm not sure if it's the same tree, but she said they've been cutting and they have. And where do you make the cut if the branches are threatening to split apart? Now, branches that threaten to split apart it's called included bark. I'm showing you pictures from Alex Shigo's book. He's passed on now, but this letter that he wrote to Steve and me when we were talking years ago says, if I can ever give you a hand, give me a call. So I'm going to assume that he would let me use his book. It's called The New Tree Biology. It is difficult to read, but amazing to look at. What I read first, before I even knew about this book, was called The New Tree Biology Dictionary. I thought, what is this? I picked it up at a used bookstore and read it, and it is just explaining the terms that he uses. So I read that first, then I read the book. And this is a man who was in charge of the United States Forestry Service for over 20 years. And for his whole career, he made a crusade of inspecting, examining how trees responded to different wounds and different conditions. And in doing that, he would dissect them. Sometimes he would injure the tree, deliberately cut a branch off in a particular way, and then wait 5 or 10 years, take that tree down, and slice it in half to look at what happened inside. And he rewrote how we view how trees grow. I mean, literally rewrote it. People were rocked back on their heels. Science changed. And this is called included bark, where the part of the tree that grows and expands, the cambium just underneath the bark, should be making new bark on the outside and new wood on the inside each year. And the tree does it in an orderly fashion to where the branch grows first, makes a new layer, it laps over the trunk, makes a new bark layer, it laps over the trunk, then the trunk grows, and the two of them grow with a ridge of joined unified material that bends outward. It's called the branch bark collar or ridge. Well, it turned inward, and they're literally growing against each other. So every year, as each one increases in diameter, they're pushing each other apart. And this is a dangerous limb. It's going to fall off.
On any tree.
Yeah. And what he says is, you're still going to cut this as you would cut another tree. You're going to look at that rolled inward rather than rolled outward collar. And you're still going to cut to preserve the collar. leave the part that is live, the growing tissue there, the branch bark ridge, leave that. It's an uglier cut, but you need to leave it and not damage the branch bark collar of the trunk. And so you leave the one on the outside there. And I cracked up when I went looking through his book to find what he says to do this one here, because a while back, Corky, who's now in Hawaii, was saying, I love talking to you because I say something about a tree and you go, oh yeah, it's just a Teresia. I thought, why do I know Teresia? Well, see there? I read about Teresia speciosa in Shigo's book, and I looked that up years ago. And when we went to Florida, I saw one and said, so I know it. How do you know these things? I don't know. They just get into your brain. So if you've got included bark, don't let those plants grow up. As the weight increases on this branch or this trunk, they're going to pull themselves apart. They're going to destroy the tree. Dangerous, dangerous tree.
There's Diane commented on the roots thing.
Yes.
On our tree commission, we have seen that a tree sapling will typically equal or exceed a larger tree planted at the same time within 5 years. The sapling also has a greater chance of being healthier than the larger tree. It really is the way to go.
It really is the way
I
to
mean,
go.
we know it.
and that's-
We've known it for years.
And authorities all over have shown that repeatedly. Gary Watson at the Morton Arboretum wrote a bulletin about it and showed where they grew spruce trees planted at 5 feet tall and ones that were 5 years older than that, and how they all uniformly caught up with and kept ahead of the bigger trees. But people want that immediate stuff. I mean, haven't we talked about that over and over? Didn't Daryl Youngquist at our weekend walkabout on Saturday talked about that as being one of the big mistakes that people make? They want to have it big right now and they end up with everything overplanted.
Way overplanted.
Yeah. Our current house is a great example. When we moved in here, I spent the first year and a half just taking things out from just a normal suburban lot. I removed 7 burning bushes, 2 weeping Norway spruces, 7 barberries. Can't remember how many honeysuckles. 6 yews and 2 lilacs.
A weeping cherry.
Oh, I forgot about the weeping cherry. And spireas, 5 spireas. And this was all just in the front of a house. But either the person who chose them to plant for themselves said, well, I need these to look good right away. Or they trusted a landscaper who was making it look good right away, thinking that that was fine, or not knowing how big things would get. But it is a mistake all the way around. We're very happy watching things grow. One of our favorite clients in the many years that we worked with her, who was 102 when she passed away and still pruning with us. She said, it's really fun to watch something grow. And that's one of the reasons that we plant them, isn't it? Watch them grow.
Yeah.
They're not true gardeners. They don't let them grow.
Elizabeth is asking, is there sterile barberry? I don't see any berries.
I have not heard of a sterile barberry.
I have not either.
Sterile barberry. They don't bloom on year-old wood. I know when we had a barberry hedge at our old house, and I would cut it all the way to the ground rather than deal with barberry branches that got old and brittle and drop their thorns to get into my fingers because they always got infected. I would just put a string around them at the beginning of the year before they leafed out and take loppers and just lop the whole bottom off and tie up that bundle and put it out at the side of the road. So they didn't have berries because I never let them flower. So it could be that you've got so much juvenile wood on there that they're not berrying. Then
And that may be good.
Yeah, birds didn't eat them. We saw robins eating them that one year. It seemed like desperate.
When they're desperate, they'll get eaten, but they're not high on the list.
Speaking of included bark, those of us who have multiple stemmed trees, they're kind of a fad. Everybody wants to have a tree that looks like a bush. And as a result, a lot of growers are sticking cuttings into a pot together, maybe many cuttings in together. And it looks cool to start with, but as they grow, where they run into each other, they cannot keep growing. And you could call that included bark in there. They're going to keep pressing against each other, and those trunks are going to spread outward. So if you've got a clump serviceberry, a clump red maple, a clump yellow wood, take a look at it and imagine the stumps getting big, getting this looks like a maple to me, Steve.
Yeah, yeah.
Might be a sweet gum. No. Well,
No,
this tree is great. See
the
these,
red maple looks like.
see these rings here, how quickly it's growing. So this is 10 years worth of growth. If on your tenure on the property, you're going to be there 10 or 20 years, imagine how big that tree's diameter trunk is going to be in 10 or 20 years, and make sure that during your tenure there, at least, it's not going to fall, split apart into pieces. I would rather that you've made sure that for all of its life, it was going to grow well, but watch out for that included bark in the stumps. Other things that have come in this week.
Nothing right now, but
Okay.
to us,
We had a Coreopsis report from Diane. Oh, uh-oh.
you clicked on the,
I clicked on the one, okay. Let
you
me,
didn't click on the number, you clicked on the,
oh, I did it again, huh?
yep.
There we go. A great reporter. I know that Diane did some writing for the newspaper in her area too. I don't think she does anymore, but she wrote to say that she also loves Coreopsis Mercury Rising. It's one of our favorite plants for quite a long time. Mercury Rising is one of the Big Bang series of hybrid threadleaf Coreopsis. And it is a long bloomer. Usually starts at the beginning of July. This year started in June.
Attracts a ton of pollinators.
Blooms for easily 2 months. And it should be red. She's noticing the flower seems to change color. Yes, Diane, we've noticed some of ours with white too. Is it reverting or mutating? I don't know.
Or is it a seedling that managed to come up through?
It's possible that it's a seedling. It's also possible that changes in soil temperature and fertility have caused some changes in flower color, because that can happen. Any of the growers who grow things in greenhouses and force them for flower shows will tell you that it's hard to keep the color on a clematis, to keep the color on a daylily or a delphinium stable when they're growing in cooler temperatures. So it could be cooler temperatures doing that, but it still is a wonderful plant. And she says it's an A+ no matter. She says even if it changes, it's such a lovely thing and such a willing plant. She also says that she has tried, it's one of its Big Bang sisters, Star Cluster, and gives it an A+ also. This is in August. It's been blooming for 2 months at this point. And as a result, and as a result of liking those so much, she noticed that there was a Little Bang series developed by the same grower. So she said, I'm going to try Little Bang. And she tried Red Elf. This is Red Elf. And she said it really did not flower well. And she gave it 2 years. She said first year maybe they don't do so well, but it didn't do well afterwards. And then she tried Red Satin, which mildewed almost immediately, and she didn't even keep that into the second year. So sometimes these series, and Steve and I have said this before, they get new plants introduced too early because the marketing people say, come on, we have to have this. And they aren't watched for long enough. That's happening more and more often. So it's good to hear from other people. Has anyone tried any of the Big Bang or the Little Bang series that they want to add to this? Because Diane asked us that.
We're just talking about one gardener and one environment. It could be totally different for other people in different areas. We shouldn't judge a whole, but it's a great report because I've been to Diane's garden and I know it's good. It's a good gardener to have a report from.
But as I said earlier, we're not trying new plants anymore just to try new plants. We used to do that, but that's when we had a big perennial garden. We could put them out there and grow them for at least 2 years and decide what we thought of them. Quite often we would get plants sent to us when I was writing for newspapers and magazines. As a garden writer, they wanted us to write about them. And always at the end of the first year, they would say, well, tell us what you think. And I would write back, I can't tell you what I think yet. It's a perennial. I have to see it for at least a full year to know how it handles the winter and how it looks in the second year. I'm not doing that anymore because I've got some that I like a lot, and I have so many people that tell me other good ones to try. We need one, but there we go. This is what Diane does. She keeps the tags and writes on them. Yellow turning white, blossomed earlier.
Hmm.
developed it. That was Starlight Red Elf. During the summer heat, it didn't do well. Anyway, that's the kind of thing that we're hoping you will share with each other and with us here or on garden tours that we do on those kinds of things. I'm still rediscovering or discovering old plants that people don't hear about anymore because the new things sell better. This is Polygonum border jewel, which had its name changed a while ago to Persicaria affini instead of Polygonum affinis. And it is an excellent ground cover.
You want a ground cover? That one is there all 4 seasons.
It stays
So
short, like you
for
see
us,
right
it
here.
stays short,
When it
easy to
blooms,
deadhead if you want to.
it doesn't bloom prolifically most of the time, and that's not a problem with us. But when it does bloom, it's a wand that stands up about 4 inches above the plant. It's a white flower that ages to a pink seed pod. So it's got a color interest. In the wintertime, although it's not evergreen, the leaves turn kind of a chocolate brown color and stay there. So there's this dense mat on the ground preventing weed seeds from falling and hitting the surface, which is wonderful. This was last year. It's had a year and a half to grow because at the beginning of last year, I took a clump of, maybe a foot square over here. I was trying to protect the lavender. I'm letting the lavender get eaten. It's losing it to the pearly everlasting and the polygonum, and that's going to happen. I said, I'm sorry, you guys, I'm not going to try to rescue you anymore, but I do need some of this. So I took about a 1 foot square piece out, divided it into about 12 pieces, put it over here, and this is what it's done in the second growing season. So it's going to eat other plants. That's true, but it's going to hold its space nicely. It probably won't win over the pearly everlasting. There'll be a combat zone at the edge between the two of them, but I doubt very much that it'll be able to beat something taller than it is that's as dense as it is.
I repeat the name.
It's called Border Jewel, and its name is Persicaria, Persica, affini, Affine, Persicaria, Affine. And our particular one might be a variety called Darjeeling Red, which supposedly has redder seed pods. I don't know that that's really the case. I haven't noticed it.
How about as a grass substitute? I'm not sure. I've never walked on it.
I walk on it to go in and out. I'll sometimes see, like this seedling pine in here. I'm going to dig that out and put it in a pot and see if I can find somebody to adopt it. But I walked in and out to take a couple of dandelions that came up in here. And I walk in and out occasionally. 3 or 4
But you won't want to go through barefoot. Look at the spider webs.
I don't walk through it daily.
No, I meant as a lawn, you might go through the lawn barefoot anytime, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
never know.
Unless you have clover in your lawn like we do, and then you watch out when it's blooming because there's bees on the clover.
I rarely go barefoot anymore.
Yeah, Steve found one of these orb weavers. No, that's not what they're called. Trapdoor. Someone will remember the names of this type of spider that make the funnel. Maybe it's funnel weavers.
Funnel spider. I thought it was a funnel spider. I don't
Yes,
know.
Steve found one of these webs on our deck today that looked like you could put your arm in.
Oh, it was
had to be a
3
very
times the
large-
size of that.
Isn't this one of the kind of webs that you and Sonia threw flies into to watch and see what how many the spider would
We
take?
did that one plus the ones that had the really designed ones, the
The yellow and black
that you could
garden
see.
spiders.
Yeah.
I think they threw 30 flies in, and the spider showed no signs of rejecting any. It just kept taking them all and scurrying away with them.
Yeah. Donna says, don't confuse the Persicarias. There's that taller one.
I think there are the whole polygonum group used to scare me to death, especially since what they call Mexican bamboo, or what's the other name they give to it? Mexican bamboo. There's one called Polygonum cuspidatum, and it's also available as Polygonum cuspidatum compactum as a ground cover. And Polygonum cuspidatum is a weed and a half. put it in, you may never get rid of it. And it has a couple of cousins that are like that, but they split the whole polygonum group up into persicarias, polygonums, and I forgot what the other one is that they moved them into. This one is okay. It is a ground cover that I can literally peel it up off of the ground. It's a shallow rooted creature, not one of the deep rooted crazy things. Every koi in this pond, you want to talk about people having energy to do stuff or not. Every koi in this pond has a name. They're all named for the Game of Thrones characters, and every one of them has a photograph so they can identify it. And each photograph is of just that fish alone at a particular angle. Steve?
Exact same angle as it grows. I have never seen anybody do before after pictures like that. It is phenomenal.
Now, will this 60-year-old be able to do that when she's 70? I don't know, but we do put our energies into the things we love the most. I'm dragging this a little too slowly here. Let's go. Let's see if we can get back. A question from Lori about what the heck is going wrong with her century maple. Because it's a near and dear plant to her. She's also got problems. We'll talk about greedy roots around cedars, which are arborvitaes. White cedars are called arborvitaes are called white cedars. Junipers are called red cedars. So we're assuming that this is the white cedars. So here's her century maple. It's one of the series of Norway maples, kind of a dwarf Norway maple. And she says it's got these spots. It had them last year. The arborist said it's not something to worry about, but they're back this year. What is going on? I think, Lori, that's anthracnose. It's a fungus problem. And it makes blotches on the leaves. It's a fungus that's killing that, and it's an irregular blotch. Most of these leaf spots, you need to watch from how they progress. They start as a small spot and coalesce into a bigger area. Some of the funguses are identified. If you have a microscope, you might be identified by what their conidia, the fruiting bodies look like on the underside, whether they're little black pustules or whether they're red or orange. But sometimes they're identified too by the fact that they've got a purple border or a tan border or a yellow center. This one looks like anthracnose, and it would make sense that anthracnose would be a problem because anthracnose can infect a plant's leaves. It infects the leaves first before anything else. When the leaf doesn't have its cuticle developed yet and is still growing out in the spring, anthracnose can get a foothold. And it's really bad in years when the spring is cool and moist. Well, last year we had a cool, moist spring, real cool, real moist spring. And a lot of funguses and leaf spots got a start. This year, we not only had a cool, moist, long spring, but before it got cool, it got warm and a bunch of plants leafed out. So we had a bunch of plants stalled in their leaf development. So for a longer period of time, they were open to infection. It's not going to kill the tree. The textbooks that we have and the extension bulletins that we have about anthracnose say it's economically not important, but cosmetically can be a problem. So it looks bad, but it's not generally going to hurt the grower or cause you to lose the plant. If you want to control it, because it's a fungus and because it infects the plant early in the year, you need to remove all the leaves this year, get as many of those leaves out of there as you can so that there's fewer spores left for next year's infection. And then you'd need to apply a fungicide as the leaves come out, and then probably every week to 2 weeks, depending on the type of fungicide, in order to protect the leaf while it's forming. Steve and I don't think it's worth it doing that because it's not a problem that's going to kill the tree. But you can also look at the fact that I'm only looking at one side of the tree, in the pictures that you've taken. But if it's worse in one area than another, ask yourself whether there's airflow problems there, whether there's moisture buildup problems there, because it could be that environmentally you could change it by letting more airflow through, by pruning to open up the plant, by relieving some stress that slows the plant's development down in the spring. But it's not an easy thing to figure out, but it's rewarding to figure it out when you say, aha, I got it figured. anthracnose. There are other leaf spots. When I first read your email and before I looked at your pictures, I thought, oh, tar spot, as we're seeing it this year. Tar spot starts as a small spot like you see here on this Norway maple.
Yeah.
Yeah, Norway maple leaf. Norway maples are quite susceptible to it, but other maples get it too. It's got the yellow ring around it. By the end of the year, it's turned black, which is why it's called tar spot. That's a fungus that was known in nurseries and could be a problem if you had a bunch of young maples out there and they got tar spot. You were going to have less growth on the maple that year because it lost some leaf surface to the tar spot. In the wild, it's no big deal, and you didn't see it very often. But all of a sudden, must have been 25 years ago now, it exploded from Oregon to Pennsylvania. Suddenly, everybody had tar spot on their Norway maples, and everybody was concerned about it. Clean up the leaves is about all that you can do. You could use a fungicide if you want to, but who wants to fungicide a tree, especially when, even if I clean up all my leaves, what about the Norway maple at the neighbor's house? What about that whole vacant lot down there that's full of Norway maple seedlings? It's going to spread around, and it eventually got to where it's in the silver maples and the sugar maples too. But it's not deadly, and
It doesn't go to any other trees.
Right, it's not going to jump out of the maples into some other species. But it's been a year like that. We're seeing mildew on peonies. We haven't seen, some peonies are susceptible, but here's a peony I shared with Diane a while ago, and I haven't seen it get mildew. But in her garden this year, I better go out and look at where it came from and see how ours they're doing. I cut them down. I know that we were talking about this at our weekend walkabout on Saturday, and Daryl was urging people to leave the peonies until they form their buds. But I operating under my premise of I don't know the plant till I've killed it. I've cut peonies down in June and July. I have cut them off because they were full of botrytis leaf spot or mildew, and I said, go ahead and die then, because I'm not going to put up with this. And they come back. So if it looks bad, you can cut it down. So we're seeing that a lot on peonies. I see we have bells of Ireland. This is bells of Ireland. It's an annual that we grow because it's a cool plant and it seeds itself around. In fact, it was earlier in that border jewel picture in the background being nice and green. And this is mildew that has killed these bracts. These are bracts around the flowers. The leaves are these serrated edge things up here, and they stick out the sides. But that's mildew, and we've never seen that before. And this is out at the edge of the road where you couldn't get more air than any place else. So this year has just not been a great year for babies. The same thing may be going on here with Sonia's GM. She said, is this a virus? No, most of the time viruses invade the tissue, use the cell, but don't kill it. They might discolor it. So you'll see a mosaic pattern. There's ring spot viruses, mosaic viruses, but they don't kill the leaf. They just stunt the plant, destroy part of the leaf. This is almost certainly a fungus. It might be botrytis, but there's a bunch of different botrytises, and they infect weakened tissue. And I'm seeing it on older leaves rather than on the younger leaves. So take it out, take the leaves, clip those leaves out. You see any discoloration on them, clip them out. There's for some reason, it's not putting up with the conditions there, and it's open to fungus infection. Lots of it this year. This will be one of the years when the crab apples are leafless. I forgot I was going to take a picture of it, Steve. The crab apple down the street that as we drove.
That is leafless.
Yeah, there's a leafless crab apple two houses over. And growing up in the crab apple, I really have to talk to the owner of the house. There is a poison ivy, absolutely lush and beautiful. And as I drove by it, it's the first time that I realized I'm really glad that poison ivy doesn't get black spot or scab or any of these other leaf spot diseases, because wouldn't that be awful to have poison ivy leaves falling into your yard and be getting poison ivy every time you went to rake the yard? Because this is green and glossy and glowing and wonderful. It is one healthy plant, and that's all that's green in this tree is the poison ivy growing up in it.
Nothing and questions.
We're too entertaining, Steve. We're going to have to be dull one of these times and not have anything to talk about. This is not a question that somebody gave me directly, but an answer to questions we've had over the years. I dug it out. I smothered it. It still keeps coming back, people tell us. Well,
Oh, yeah.
okay, here's why. Here's our lawn. Now, this is the kind of lawn we grow. It's called utility turf. It means it's green and we keep it cut. There's probably 7 different kinds of grass in there, including some that I hate. But I was walking along doing something else and I looked down and said, oh, for crying out loud. See the myrtle in there? Pinka minor? Cut by the mower even. You can see the slice on its leaves. That myrtle was in a bed, I want to say 3 feet from where we are right now. Was
At
a
least.
bed that was full of myrtle when we moved into this house. I dug the myrtle out, smothered the area, but it had roots underneath the grass and it's still there. And should I let down my guard, it's going to creep from the grass over into that bed and come back up again, unless you keep watching. Now, when did I take that whole bed of lily of the valley and myrtle out, Steve? 5 years ago now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so once there, these aggressive plants remain aggressive, and the gardener has to remember that the gardener who knows the history of a property is the great gardener. I wish I knew what had been done to these trees and these bushes before we got here. I really wonder why they got, we know our lilac is in terrible trouble because I've dug down deep enough to find out that there's plastic underneath everything. But I wouldn't know that just looking at them. I might be paying somebody to
Hmm.
spray my plants or paying for a new thing to be planted right on top of the same bad place. I'm gonna keep on rolling. We talked about lilac borer. I think we talked about it during the weekend walkabout, mentioned it the Friday before. But people asked us, okay, when do we want to ambush the lilac borers? If we can't get them when they're inside the trunk of the lilac, how do we go about getting them? So if you've got a lilac that's got leaves curling up, browning out, drying, growing sickly and thin like this, very little new growth, then you heard us talk about lilac borer, and you would recognize then, see the holes at the crotches where lilac borers have repeatedly been laying their eggs and the caterpillars go inside and bore through the trunk. You can see those holes all over there. We explained that you need to cut out old trunks, and on a lilac that's growing this poorly as this, I would cut out 2 of the oldest trunks, wait for it to start suckering, and then start cutting out more trunks. But some people said, well, I don't want to cut it. Can I kill the borers when they come out of the wood and lay eggs? There's a short period of time when they do that. And there's a book it's out of print. It was A Labor of Love by Don Orton at the Morton Arboretum. And for a long time, you can write to Plantsman's Press and get it. But now look for it in used books because it's dense, but it's wonderful. And it tells us about the timing of pests based on what else is blooming. Because I could tell you, and I did tell you that sometime in April, probably late April, you need to control for the adults, which means that you would spray an oil on the trunk so that if the adults laid eggs there, the eggs, when they hatched, would have oil on them. The larvae would have oil on them and then smother. And you would have to do that during the egg laying period. Rather than saying April, because April could be cold one year, it could be warm the next year. Lilacs can bloom early, they can bloom later. Don Orton says, watch as your indicator plant for lilac borer. Watch for when the snowmound spirea, that's the old-fashioned Van Hoot spirea, is in full bloom. That's when the lilac borer adults emerge. And so for the 2 or 3 weeks after that, you need to keep the trunks of those trees, particularly in the areas where the crotches are weak, covered with a dormant oil to kill the eggs as they come out. His alternate plants, he said, if you don't have mountain ash, you can watch. You can watch when your own lilac is in late bloom, get it then. Or when the horse chestnut's in full bloom, or when the mountain ash is finishing bloom. And that's a really very valuable piece of information on a lot of different woody plant pests and coincide.
Do borers get into elderberries also? They
Oh,
get
yes.
into, yeah.
Yeah, the elderberry gets its own borer, elderberry borer, and it is a guaranteed. I believe they get in at the tips of new growth and bore their way down. But Also with elderberry, as with lilac, your best bet is to keep old wood pruned out. The wood gets older, take out a cane. The next year, take out the oldest cane. The next year, take out the oldest cane. Let it keep having new canes, and you've got a healthier plant.
Indeed.
Yes, indeed. Let's see what else came up this week. The sickly azalea. Yep. This question has been repeated to us over the years with almost any plant put in the azalea field here. It's beautiful in spring. Now it's worrisome and sickly in summer. And will it be okay if I move it? It will be better if you move it to a better place.
Or it will die.
Yeah. This is probably an azalea that has too much competition at its roots. Given that it's got daylilies near it that appear to have bloomed pretty well, it's in too much sun for an azalea. They need to have protection in the middle of the day. They like it cool. They like it. Think about walking in the tops of the Smoky Mountains where the smoky mist rolls in every day, and where they're underneath big trees. That's where these azaleas belong. And actually, most of these azaleas belong in Asia, but in that kind of situation. If you look up azalea leaf spot, if you say, well, there's spots on the leaves, let's try looking up azalea leaf spot. And you look for that .edu, those reliable sources, you're going to find that leaf spot or leaf scorch is caused by a fungus, dark brown to red spots in early summer. Then they turn a lighter brown and the leaf turns yellow around them. Does that sound like this? If it sounds like this, then what you want to do is move it to a better place, because stress does incredible things to plants. Does terrible things to plants. If I look up Washington State University's fact sheet, it says there's no chemical management recommended. It needs good air circulation, destroy infected leaves. And Maryland's extension says, look for a better site. And when you do, check the roots. I grabbed on that one and went, yes, Maryland, do it. Check the roots. Make sure that it's got roots that aren't
That
trained.
again would have been my first thing regardless.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay. And then I think we have,
Michelle just mentioned that her elderberries are huge and she just wants to cut it all down. Think that
Yeah.
would be
Yeah,
would
you
be
can-
okay, she thinks. And I said, yep, it would. I gave
Yeah.
her a thumbs up anyway.
I had a terrible experience with cutting an elderberry all the way down, though. It's better to do that before it starts to grow. It really scorches the new foliage when it comes up all brand new and it's summer. So cut it down right before it starts growing in the spring or in the wintertime. We had the new
We got
fall.
about 2 minutes.
Well, good. If you've got a bare space, you can put a new plant in anytime, but pick it well, especially this time of year. We had this space in our perennial garden. This is it. We have a lot of garden. I haven't figured out how many 1,000 square feet we've got that's planted, but this 180 square feet is our perennial garden. This is my 2 hours a month take care of garden where I can divide things and whatever. And I meant for there to be a focal point here. And one of the plants that was there didn't like it there. I said, oh, now what do I do? I've got this space that is surrounded by variegated plants, this variegated obedient plant, little angel, brunette, and a variegated euphorbia. And they're keeping the eye going down low and among bigger plants on that space. So after a lot of thinking about what to put there, and we might have told you about this earlier, I said purple leaf would be so good to have there. And I was so focused on perennials that I didn't think of canna until I think Steve mentioned it. I went, oh, for crying out loud. And yeah, we did that at the library. And although it's dark, it kind of becomes a pool that you look at and it pulls your eye down and in. And as long as you keep up with the water on this time of year, so Steve can look out his window and see something nice there. There's the sanguisorbium called Little Angel. Such a cute little plant.
But yeah, I like that one a lot.
Yep. And that Little Angel is right in the foreground here. It's orange perfection phlox, Gaillardia, just barely showing up through an opening in the phlox. The Roseanne geranium and the blue pincushion flower were the earlier frames on that focal point. There's sedum, Vera Jameson repeating what's going on with the purple leaf there. And we have some new purple leaf plants that'll come up behind when we take that failing lilac out. Pincushion flower, bloomed for 2 months. It's about done now. I'll deadhead it one more time. We'll have a few flowers on it. Okay, let's see, where did my? Uh-oh,
Bottom,
I need to jump. Oh, bottom. Yes,
bottom.
bottom, thank you. There we
Welcome.
are. Yep. So there we are, ready to go. Speaking of Smokies, is that the Smokies, Steve?
Yeah, it was either Smokies or in Tennessee, a valley, going to a battlefield.
All
But
right,
I think it was the Smokies.
here is the,
Carol quickly wants to know which creeping thyme are you growing near your street?
we're growing 2 creeping thymes, woolly thyme and golden thyme. Golden thyme is the Thymus serpulum aureum, and the creeping thyme is Thymus pseudolaniginosus. Just remember Thymus pseudo.
Yep.
This is the campanula, and many of the campanulas, don't plant them if you got rabbits and groundhogs. You'll never see them ever again. Foxtail lily, for those of you who come to our garden, you'll need to remember foxtail lily. Virginia sweetspire, very good. The honeybee is loving it. One of the irises, I've forgotten which iris. I think this one is one of the blue flag hybrids.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's all we can do for Free for All Friday this 15th time. We are glad to take your questions at gardenaz.org by email, or you can text them to us. The next time we'll be here for Free for All Friday is next Friday, August 16th. And if you're a weekend walkabout subscriber, we can see you this weekend because we will be in our garden all weekend, and Stephen will be visiting the other 3 gardens that are open, 2 in Clarkston and 1 in Troy. If you didn't get your
And
invitation,
it's not too late to subscribe. If you send us an email, say, I want to subscribe, we'll send you the invite.
yeah. And if you didn't get your invitation, let us know. You can send us
Yep.
an email tonight. And
If
if
you're-
you're not a subscriber and you're not into doing that, I know our time, there's limits on our time. You can meet us in the garden and at the Waterford Township Library. That's Waterford Township, Michigan. This coming Wednesday, August 14th, we'll be there at 4:30 working in the gardens, and at 7 o'clock for an education session. You can come watch us, you can learn, you can dig with us if you want, you can do whatever. It's free. We don't put any strings on anybody who comes. We just love to talk gardens, and it's a beautiful garden to work in. So we're glad to have talked to you today,
Yeah.
and
Have a good evening and take care, everybody.
we'll see you this weekend, or we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Bye.